Before the US elections, we touched on Donald Trump's immigration policies in his previous tenure. But what has transpired in just first 2 3 weeks now of his presidency is on an entirely different scale. The reality that we're seeing now is far more intense, it's far more serious, it's far more urgent. That's why I felt it was important to dedicate an entire episode to the issue because what's happening deserves the world's full attention. Now, when we talk about immigration and from an immigrant's perspective, especially, and well, any kind of immigration, regardless of the status, it's quite literally a leap into the unknown. It means leaving behind a home, a culture, quite often an identity. It's trading the familiar for the unknown, the comfort of belonging for the uncertainty of starting over from scratch. And many a time, being aware of the fact that everything might not go as planned. Some leave in pursuit of opportunity, others leave simply to survive. But regardless of the reasons immigrants, documented or not, do not uproot their lives unaware. They do so out of necessity. And I think this is what the world needs to understand. Having had the opportunity to live outside of my home country for some time as well, I've seen firsthand what it takes to make that leap. And I would never ever justify the wrong or illegal or the dangerous paths that some take to cross borders, risking their lives. But ironically, some actually do it to give life another chance. And I do believe with all my heart that everyone, every human being deserves the chance of a normal life, a life of dignity, safety, and opportunity. When someone is willing to gamble everything, to walk through fire and face the unknown, it's not because they want to break the rules or they're very adventurous. It's because they have already lost everything else. The only thing left is themselves. The least countries, governments, world can do is to address immigration with more humane policies, with better reforms. What we're witnessing in US is extreme. And by the way, this is despite overwhelming evidence that immigration is not linked to crime, at least in the US. Now the president has announced to send some of the immigrants to Guantanamo Bay, which we're going to come to in a bit. But before that, I want us to look at some stats. According to the data from the 2022 census, at least 11 million people in the US live without legal status, with 77% having resided there for 5 years or more. The vast majority of the undocumented immigrants, around 80%, initially in the 80s, were concentrated in 6 states: California, Texas, Florida, New York, New Jersey, and Illinois. This means that these states bore the primary impact of unauthorized immigration. However, over time, the distribution of these migrants has become more widespread across the country. So while these 6 states still have a significant share, they now account for around 50 plus 55, 56% of the total undocumented population, which means that other states have seen a significant increase as well. The largest groups of unauthorized immigrants in the US, ranked in order of population, are Mexico, with the highest number of individuals, so around 5.3 million, making up approximately 48% of the total unauthorized population, which is why the wall. El Salvador is around 7%, Guatemala is again around 7%, India is around 550,000 individuals, Honduras again around 500,000 individuals. For centuries, immigrants from the Irish to the Chinese, Italians to Mexicans to Muslims in the US have been scapegoated for crime, and particularly in tough times, particularly in periods of economic instability or political uncertainty. There's a report published by the American Immigration Council which sort of dismantles the whole narrative. They say that between 1980 and 2022, the immigration in the US, when it doubled, the crime rate fell. The 2017 to 2022 state level analysis also found that there's no statistical link between immigration and increased crime rates. The idea of a migrant crime surge is not a reality. It is a political tool that is used to stoke fear, that is used to blame everybody else for your own internal problems. Despite the overwhelming evidence and the mass deportation already happening, President Trump, after signing the Laken Riley Act, has now announced plans to transfer some undocumented migrants to Guantanamo Bay, a move that raises profound ethical, legal, humanitarian concerns. Now, what is the Laken Riley Act? The Laken Riley Act is a United States law that requires the US Department of Homeland Security to detain illegal immigrants. This act also allows states to sue the Department of Homeland Security for alleged failures in immigration enforcement. The bill was introduced following the murder of Laken Riley by an illegal immigrant who had previously been cited for shoplifting on the campus of the University of Georgia in Athens. The murder of Laken Riley was a senseless tragedy, and no one denies the need for justice. But what President Trump is proposing right now is not justice. It is one of the most extreme dystopian responses to immigration in modern US history. Sending 30,000 undocumented immigrants to Guantanamo Bay is a grotesque display of authoritarianism disguised as security policy. Now, I'm going to give you a bit of a background of Guantanamo Bay. This is a detention center which is considered to be one of the most notorious detention centers in modern world history, a place that was deliberately designed to strip people of their basic legal and human rights. It was created in 2002, right after 9/11, and is considered to be a legal black hole where neither the US nor international law applies, allowing the government to imprison individuals accused of terrorism indefinitely without trial. For over 2 decades, for over 20 years, detainees in Guantanamo have been subjected to torture, to force feeding, to sham military trials. In fact, in 2023, there was a report that was published that basically details the horrific conditions these people had been kept into. 780 men and boys were detained for years without due process. Yet only seven were convicted, five of whom pleaded guilty just to have a chance at the release, basically. These were not fair trials. These were military commissions that failed to meet even the most basic standards of justice. Prisoners who protested their indefinite detention with hunger strikes were subjected to brutal force feeding, where detainees were shackled in restrained chairs for hours. They were forced to endure a 61 centimeter tube shoved through their nostril into the stomach, and then locked in dry cells without water under constant surveillance. This is the environment where some now propose sending undocumented immigrants, not convicted violent criminals, not terrorists, but even the ones accused of something like shop theft. The idea of sending immigrants, many of who have landed into your country because they're fleeing violence or persecution or extreme hardship, in a facility like Guantanamo is not just a mischaracterization of their circumstances or making fun of their circumstances, but it also sets a very dangerous precedent for USA itself, I think. The decision to expand this facility as a detention site for migrants is not going to solve the challenges of immigration, it's going to exacerbate them. I think rather than addressing border security and immigration reform with better practical policies, this move signals a willingness to resort to extreme measures that have been globally condemned. And no one is arguing to open borders, but there is a massive difference between enforcing immigration laws responsibly and rounding up 30,000 people for what? A political stunt? For God's sake, we're talking about America. Smarter technology, better visa tracking, targeted law enforcement, There's so much that can be done. We don't need to tell you that. By the way, even under the Laken Riley Act, most undocumented immigrants affected are charged with theft related offenses or lesser crimes, not violent felonies. What we're trying to say is non violent immigrants being sent to this facility is not justified. It's not even proportionate to the crime. Now, let's talk about the economic impact because that is going to be huge with this. Over the last 5 fiscal years, it cost an estimated average of $20,000 to deport one person out of the US. This is an analysis that I believe the CBS News did of the federal data. And the figure is basically based on budget allocations for each step of the deportation process, the apprehension of the undocumented immigrant, to the detention, to the immigration court process, of course, and eventually the transport out of the country. Beyond the immediate fiscal outlay, the broader economic repercussions are looking significant as well. So, undocumented immigrants in the US, by the way, contribute substantially to the US economy, paying an estimated $46.8 billion in federal taxes and $29.3 billion in state and local taxes. This is I think 2022 alone. Then 22.8 billion in social security, around 5.7 billion in Medicare. Removing the workforce will disrupt this and the key industries. So the US economy is hugely dependent on some industries where the share or the contribution of these undocumented immigrants is massive. So construction, hospitality, housing, agriculture, etc. So we're looking at those industries, we're looking at the impact at them as well. Moreover, I think the departure of these workers would eventually shrink the tax base. So it's potentially going to lead to higher taxes for others as well. Now let's talk about immigrants. There is a woman by the name Carla Conejo Villavicencio. Carla was born in Ecuador and was brought into the US at age 5, I believe. She has risen from a delivery man's daughter and has become one of the first undocumented students admitted into Harvard and later a doctoral candidate at Yale. She is also a writer for the New York Times. In her book, The Undocumented Americans, Carla basically goes beyond the well-known debates about the border crisis or the dreamer activism. Instead, she focuses on the everyday struggles of these individuals living in the margins of the society. Stories rarely covered by the media. So there are accounts of people and families across America and a world that no one cares to look deep into, basically. She introduces us to the undocumented workers who cleaned up ground zero after 9/11, risking their health for a country that refuses to recognize them. So she's gone to different parts of America and taken accounts of all these people. In Miami, like for example, she exposes the underground botanicas where immigrants are denied health care due to their status. So they turn to folk medicine or other means of healing. Similarly, in Flint, Michigan, she captures the fear of immigrants who must present identification to receive clean drinking water, knowing a simple trip to the grocery store could end in deportation. These are not the stories that make headlines because in mainstream media these lives are not human lives. They're just numbers. Yet they define the lived reality of millions. So it's an excellent book. It's a little tough to digest. It forces you to confront the human cost of a broken immigration system and challenges to redefine what it really means to be American. Stories in the news often end at the deportation, at the airport scene. But each deportation means a shattered family, a marriage ending, a custody battle, children who overnight go from being raised by two parents to one parent with single income, children who become orphans in foster care. Expanding legal pathways for immigration, improving border security through better methods, perhaps, and offering due process to those seeking asylum, I think, are far more effective solutions. We thought US had a very big heart. The answer to immigration challenges is not Guantanamo. It is a comprehensive reform rooted in dignity and security and opportunity for all. History will judge this moment. But the question is whether the US will stand by its founding principles or repeat the failures of its darkest chapters. As an ending note, I will again read some lines from Gala's book. She says, "The twisted inversion that many children of immigrants know is that at some point, your parents become your children, and your own personal American dream becomes making sure They age and die in dignity in a country that has never wanted them. With this, we're done for today. I would love to have your feedback, your suggestions, your comments. My heart really goes out to everybody who's in the middle of nowhere, a little clueless, trying to figure out life. Things will be okay. This too shall pass. We're also coming up with a new show, which is a different format. I will be sharing the details very soon. Till then, stay tuned and take care of yourself. Goodbye.